Taxi drivers, what's the weirdest thing you've ever heard from passengers? Story 1. One night I picked up a couple who seemed to completely forget I was there. They got into the back seat and right away they started talking. At first it was nothing unusual, just the usual chit-chat talking about where they had just been and where they were headed next. But as the conversation went on, it started to take a strange turn. The woman mentioned something about a secret they had to keep, something that could never come out. My ears perked up, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because it's hard not to notice when things start sounding suspicious. The man tried to calm her down, saying everything would be fine as long as they stuck to the plan. Now I'm thinking maybe it's about a surprise party or something innocent, but then she said something that made my heart race a little. She said, "What if someone finds out what we did?" The tone of her voice, the way she said it, sent chills down my spine. The guy reassured her, telling her to relax, that nobody would ever find out as long as they kept their mouths shut. He said, "It's buried, and that's where it's going to stay." I was driving through the city, but my mind was racing. Buried? What the hell did they bury? My imagination went wild, but I knew better than to react. I just kept my eyes on the road and acted like I didn't hear a thing. She started to cry softly, and he reached over to comfort her, saying it was the only way and they had no choice. By this point, I was trying to piece together what they could be talking about, but nothing made sense. They kept going back and forth, talking in hushed tones, mentioning something about a night in the woods and how they needed to forget about it and move on. When we finally reached their destination, they paid in cash, and the guy looked at me through the rearview mirror for just a second too long. It was like he was checking if I'd heard anything, or if I was just another oblivious driver. I played it cool, gave them a friendly nod, and they got out without another word. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just overheard something I shouldn't have. To this day, I wonder what exactly they were talking about. Was it really something as sinister as it sounded, or was my mind just running wild? All I know is some things are better left buried, both literally and figuratively. Story 2. It was late, probably around 2 a.m. when I got a request to pick up a guy from a bar on the other side of town. As soon as he got in, I could tell he was pretty drunk. Not the rowdy, out-of-control kind of drunk, but the quiet, reflective type. He slumped into the back seat and let out a long sigh, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I started driving, and for a while he just stared out the window, lost in thought. After a few minutes, he started talking, more to himself than to me. He said, "You ever wonder how one decision can change everything?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, and he looked back at me, waiting for some kind of response. I just nodded and said, "Yeah, sometimes." That was all it took. He started spilling his guts like I was his therapist or something. He told me about how he'd met this girl at the bar a few weeks ago, and they hit it off right away. They started seeing each other, and everything seemed perfect. But then, tonight, she told him something that shattered his world. Turns out she was married, and not just married, but married to his boss. He found out because she slipped up, mentioned her husband's name, and it clicked. He couldn't believe it at first, but the more she talked, the more it all made sense. She begged him not to say anything, swore she was going to leave her husband, that she was in love with him, but he didn't know what to do. He kept saying, "What do I do now? I'm in love with her, but if I tell him, I'll lose my job. If I don't, I'm living a lie." I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say in a situation like that? I just kept driving, letting him talk it out. He went on about how he could never look his boss in the eye again, how he felt like he was betraying him every time he saw him, but at the same time, he couldn't imagine not being with her. He was trapped, and he knew it. By the time we got to his place, he was almost in tears. He thanked me for the ride, said something about needing to figure things out, and stumbled out of the car. As I watched him walk up to his building, I couldn't help but feel sorry for the guy. He was in deep, and there was no easy way out. I drove off into the night, thinking about how messy life can get, how sometimes one wrong turn can lead you down a path you never wanted to take. I've driven a lot of people in my time, but that guy, he stuck with me. Every now and then, I wonder what happened to him, if he ever found a way out of that mess, or if he's still caught in that same trap, trying to figure out how to get his life back on track. Story 3. One evening, just as my shift was winding down, I got a request from a pretty upscale neighborhood. When I pulled up, a well-dressed man in his late 30s or early 40s got in. He looked tense, like something was really bothering him. As I started driving, he pulled out his phone and began speaking in a low, controlled voice. At first, I wasn't paying much attention, just focused on the road, but then I heard him say something that made me perk up. "We can't let her find out. It'll ruin everything." Now, I'm not one to pry, but the way he was was talking, it was hard not to listen. He kept saying things like, "We need to keep it between us," and "I don't care how much it costs, just make sure it's taken care of." My mind started racing, wondering what he could be talking about. Was it a business deal gone wrong? Maybe something more personal? The tone of his voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency that made it clear this was serious. He continued on, mentioning meetings and money being transferred, and then he dropped a bomb. "If she finds out about the other account, I'm finished. Everything I've built will be gone." I didn't know what to think. Was he hiding money from his wife? Embezzling? It wasn't clear, but it was definitely shady. He was giving instructions to someone on the other end, making sure they'd cover all their tracks, delete emails, avoid phone calls, and stay out of sight. The whole thing sounded like something out of a crime drama, but this was real life. I kept driving, trying to focus on the road while pieces of this guy's secret life unfolded in my back seat. Eventually, he hung up and let out a deep breath, like he was trying to calm himself down. Then, as if suddenly remembering where he was, he looked up at me through the rearview mirror. Our eyes met for a split second and I could see a flash of something. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. He quickly looked away, probably realizing that I'd heard more than I should have. The rest of the ride was silent, and when we finally reached his destination, he paid in cash, adding a generous tip, and got out without another word. As I drove off, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of life this guy was living, juggling secrets and lies, trying to keep everything from falling apart. I'll never know the full story, but that night, I got a glimpse into a world where appearances are everything, and the truth is buried deep beneath layers of deception. It made me think about how people can look so put together on the outside, but inside, they're struggling to keep their secrets hidden, knowing that if even one of them gets out, it could all come crashing down. Story 4. One night, I picked up this young woman, probably in her mid-20s, from outside a downtown club. She got in the car, clearly upset, her makeup smudged from what looked like crying. She gave me her address, and as I started driving, she immediately pulled out her phone and began dialing. I couldn't help but overhear the conversation that followed. And let me tell you, it was intense. She called a guy, and as soon as he answered, she went off. "How could you do this to me?" she yelled, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. She kept asking him why he would cheat on her, why he would lie. The guy on the other end was trying to calm her down, but it wasn't working. She kept talking over him, recounting how she found out. Apparently, she had seen messages on his phone earlier that day, messages from another woman. What really caught my attention, though, was when she started talking about their future. "We were supposed to move in together next month. I gave up everything for you," she cried. There was a desperation in her voice that made it clear how deeply she had invested in this relationship. She mentioned leaving her job, moving to a new city, all to be with this guy, and now she felt like it was all for nothing. The guy kept trying to apologize, saying it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but she wasn't having it. A mistake? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk, not sleeping with someone else, she shot back. I could feel the weight of her words, the raw emotion in her voice. She went on, telling him how she had always been faithful, how she never doubted him for a second, and now she felt like a fool. At one point, she got really quiet, and for a moment, I thought the call had dropped. But then she said, almost in a whisper, "How could you do this to us?" That's when it hit me. She wasn't just angry, she was heartbroken. The guy must have realized it too, because he started pleading with her, saying he'd do anything to make it right. But she just laughed, a bitter, broken laugh, and said, "There's nothing left to fix, you broke it." By the time we reached her apartment, she was silent, just staring out the window. She ended the call without saying goodbye, wiped her eyes, and thanked me in a voice so small it was almost a whisper. She got out of the car and walked slowly toward her building, like every step was taking all the strength she had left. I drove away, thinking about how love can turn into something so painful, how someone's whole world can fall apart in the space of a single night. It made me wonder how many other people I've driven around who've had their hearts broken or their dreams shattered, and I never knew. We all carry our own stories, our own wounds, but sometimes those stories spill out in the backseat of a taxi, and for a brief moment, a stranger like me gets to witness the raw, unfiltered truth of someone else's life. Story 5. One rainy night, I got a request to pick up a guy from a pretty swanky hotel downtown. When he got in, he looked exhausted, like he'd just been through the ringer. He was in his late 30s, well dressed, but you could see the weariness in his eyes. As soon as I started driving, he got on the phone. His voice was calm at first, but it quickly escalated. "I can't believe you did this." he said, his tone cold and sharp. He was talking to a woman, and from what I could gather, it was his wife. He kept asking her how she could betray him, how she could go behind his back like that. The conversation got heated fast, and it became clear that she had done something he considered unforgivable. You knew how much this meant to me, he said, almost spitting the words out. You knew, and you still went ahead and did it. I was piecing things together as I drove. It sounded like she had made some kind of decision without him, something big. He kept saying, how could you make that choice without even talking to me? His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. Then he said something that really caught my attention. I thought we were partners in this. I thought we were in this together, but now I don't even know who you are anymore. There was a long pause, and I could hear her on the other end, trying to explain, but he wasn't having any of it. It's not just about the money, he said, his voice lowering, filled with a kind of sadness that was hard to ignore. It's about trust. You've shattered that. I don't know how we come back from this. As we drove through the rain-soaked streets, he started talking about how they had built everything together, how they'd faced so many challenges and had always gotten through them because they had each other's backs. But now, he felt like she had thrown all of that away. You didn't even give me a chance to be part of the decision, he said, his voice breaking a little. You just did it, like my opinion didn't matter. It was clear that whatever she had done, it wasn't something small. He mentioned something about selling a property. Apparently, she had sold it without consulting him, something that had a lot of emotional value to him, maybe even tied to his family. He was devastated, not just by the loss of the property, but by the way she had gone about it, like it was nothing. By the time we reached his destination, he was silent, just staring at the phone in his hand, like he couldn't believe what had just happened. He ended the call without saying another word, handed me some cash, and got out of the car. I watched as he stood in the rain for a moment, just looking up at the sky, before he finally walked into the building. As I drove away, I couldn't stop thinking about how trust, once broken, is so hard to rebuild. That night, I saw a man who wasn't just angry or betrayed. He was heartbroken, grieving not just the loss of something valuable, but the loss of the trust he thought was unshakable. It made me realize how fragile even the strongest relationships can be. How one decision, one moment can change everything.